What about this story? Schoolgirls at a secondary in South Wales will be banned from wearing skirts under a new equality-driven uniform policy. From September, the school in Bridgend will require all pupils to wear trousers. The school says it's about practicality and fairness. Let's speak to Candice Holdsworth, writer and broadcaster and skirt wearer of some note, it should be said. Candice, look, I think it's all about choice, isn't it? But to not be allowed to wear a skirt? What on earth's going on?
Yeah, I mean, this is just wokeness gone mad. I know I sound like a ranting Daily Mail reader, but that's exactly what I am. Yeah, they've been doing this for years. It was in Bristol a few years ago. There was another school that caused an outcry by introducing a gender-neutral school uniform policy, which essentially meant that the stuff that the girls like to wear, like skirts, were just erased. And this is exactly what happens whenever you talk about gender neutrality, because it's never gender neutral. It actually always ends up that the girls look more like the boys, because it's always things like skirts, pink, long hair, all of that gets rejected.
Yeah.
And I think it gives girls the message at a very key developmental stage, actually, that there's something wrong with things that girls like, you know, like pink stinks and that sort of thing. And I think a lot of feminists sometimes unwittingly give their daughters that message when they don't like them playing with Barbies and they don't like them wearing pink tutus and things like that. All the stuff that girls love to do, by the way. And it's just a form of social engineering that doesn't work, because we all know, if any of us who've had children know that girls are drawn to certain things and boys are drawn to certain things. I mean, I remember when I was at school, they completely relaxed the school uniform rules, and they said that the girls could wear the boys' uniform if they wanted.
Yeah.
And so on some days they would. Sometimes girls would wear trousers, but a lot of days they would choose to wear skirts. Of course, not one single boy came to school wearing a skirt, but that's just the way that boys and girls are, and it would have been unrealistic to expect otherwise.
Yeah, I was at school, and I think this has continued a little bit into adulthood. Certainly at school, I was always envious of girls. I thought that girls, it wasn't the fact that they had much more, they could do much more with their hair, they could do much more if they wore makeup and stuff, they could do all of that. What I was actually envious of, Candice, as a young teenage schoolboy, was the sheer power that girls had. It was power, nothing more than that. They carried all the cards at that time of life, and of course a 14-year-old girl is not interested in a 14-year-old boy. She'd rather be dating a 15 or a 16-year-old boy, sometimes older, as it turned out. But yeah, I thought girls had great power. So, and I don't, with power comes great responsibility, and great responsibility comes skirts. So I think it's only reasonable that you give girls a choice, right?
Yes, but do you know what's going on in the heads of girls that age?
Yeah.
They're feeling just as unsure of themselves, trying to figure boys out, have no idea that they have that kind of power. That sort of comes a bit later when girls are more mature. And I found it so interesting, the recent death of Bridget Bardot. I mean, she was a woman who discovered her true feminine power, and it was quite an awesome, terrifying thing. And the French society at the time, which was quite a religious, conservative society, did not like it and tried very, very hard to suppress it. But I think that, as a culture, we go through phases like that, right? Where like ultra femininity is celebrated. And then maybe there are times when people want to do stuff that's maybe a bit more edgy. But I think that we should just leave it to people to decide and leave it to the kids to decide, because they are going through that experimental phase when they're teenagers. Yeah. They're sort of figuring out how they are. They're starting to become attracted to the opposite sex. All those things. Just let it happen naturally. I just feel like adults are just getting too involved in the lives of teenagers and controlling them too much. And I think what we're storing up for the future is a massive rebellion.
Do you think that's on its way, a rebellion of the next generation or something, Candice?
I think so. I think that there's so much of it. I mean, with the social media ban as well, rather than parents thinking, okay, we'll help kids navigate that, which is exactly what you should be doing as a parent. It's just shut it down. I mean, I encounter it all the time. I think that there's a lot of overparenting going on. We are going through a phase of helicopter parenting, and we're sort of not, we forget that the teenage years are such an important developmental phase. They are an experimental phase. It is when kids start forming relationships with each other, maybe start experimenting sexually, you know, maybe starting to wear short skirts and stuff, and yeah, that kind of thing. And it's normal, and we have to let them just get on with it. But I think nowadays there is, in our safety-obsessed culture, we shut it down. And we're sort of trying to keep them as permanent children, but it's not going to work. After the 1950s, that's why there was that huge rebellion in the 1960s, because I think kids felt very constrained, excessively constrained by their parents.
Yeah, it's a kind of balance, that, isn't it? I've got a friend who, two of his kids have been through school. One of them is, you know, just starting out in secondary school. He's got a very liberal view. He hates the idea of school. He's American, so maybe that slightly informs his views. But he thinks that school uniform is not just the wrong thing, but almost counterproductive. He thinks it's terrible, whereas I love all that uniformity. I want us to be back. I'm sorry to disagree on this point, Candice. I want it to be the 1950s. I want rigidity, uniformity, strictness. I want the flipping cane. I want the slipper. I want everything back. No, I don't. Not quite, because that last bit never really worked. But I do like the idea that you can learn something from a certain level of uniformity, and that includes wearing the uniform. But he says, no, it has the very opposite effect, and believes that there's a certain... that the more liberal approach is actually more healthy for kids.
For me, look, so personally, I do like a school uniform because I think it's a leveler. I think that, you know, especially for kids who maybe can't afford designer clothes, and all these things can become important when you're a teenager. It's just better that everyone can wear the school uniform. And I would say if you're going to have school uniform, you should have rules. You know, you can specify to girls, and that's what it was like when I was at school. You can say you should not wear your skirt needs to be a certain length, and I think it's totally fine to say that.
Yeah.
And, you know, make sure kids take pride in their uniform. And I think that that's something very that was always in the British educational tradition, and I think it's really, really important, and I'm totally for that. I think it's always a mix, right, of, you know, sort of letting go, tightening up, letting go, tightening up. You're navigating, you're helping kids navigate the world. I don't think you should shut everything down and ban everything, but at the same time, you have to provide that structure. And I say this, and I know as a parent, it is really, really hard to find that balance. It is not easy.
Just a final point on skirts themselves, and I've never understood. I saw it yesterday when I came off the train. So it's not just school kids or school girls, it's just or girls in general. What's the deal with wearing the shortest possible skirt and then walking down the road constantly sort of pulling it down? What's that all about? Just wear a longer bloody skirt. I mean, what's the deal there?
Well, the thing is when I was younger, you were really told off for that. I mean, I do think so. I think, look, I mean, there's nothing wrong with, I don't think anyone should feel ashamed for wanting to wear a shorter skirt. But I do think, I mean, there is a certain level of taste and decency. And I think, you know, you should be able to tell a young girl that, like, no, you shouldn't be walking down the street with your bum showing,
yes,
you know.
I get that. I get that. Listen, Candice, great to have you on as ever. Nice to see you again as well. Candice Holdsworth, writer and broadcaster on that specific issue.